Hello and welcome to this webinar, the education webinar series that the Hindu conducts every Saturday at 5 p.m. It's 5 p.m., it's 5:01 already, and today's topic is how should AI be taught to children in schools, of course. The context for this, I would say, is that there are some very, very significant mega trends happening in technology which will impact how we live our lives. AI is one aspect of how machines are becoming more and more intelligent. They may do things that the human mind is already doing, and they may also do things that the human body does. So that is at one part where we are seeing a huge change in technology and adoption and the way we are living. There's also the other aspect of how the mind and the body are also being impacted, influenced, and changed by equipment. That's another topic, more cutting edge. It's probably likely to come. We're talking things like Neuralink and things like that, maybe a little into the future. But these are broad mega trends that are sort of happening, and it is most people think we would be living very differently from the way we are living now, 20 years later. So that means our education system too has to change. It has to incorporate different fundamentals, and not just Newton and maybe Einstein in class 11, but much more involved, much more different sort of fundamental knowledge and concepts may need to be put in the school system. As a beginning to that, AI has been discussed for a while now, a couple of years at least. Seriously, the central government, the CBSE, has introduced a curriculum for class 3 onwards. They call it AI and computational thinking. So they will start with what's called computational thinking, and then slowly introduce AI as well in class 6 and so on. So this broad curriculum has been released, and already many voices have been raised, critiquing, supporting, appreciating, and so on. And we will also do that in this webinar. We have another panel, a really good, dedicated, sincere, knowledgeable panel with us. We have two who may be familiar to those who've been watching the webinar. They've contributed immensely. Bhanu Potta and Viplav Bakshi, their edtech experts, have been very, very generous with their knowledge and their time. We have Asif Iqbal, who's written for the Hindu and who wrote a very critical article on the curriculum itself. So let's without wasting too much time, let's ask the experts, what is the curriculum, what is it seeking to do, its pros and cons, and so on. We'll start with Bhanu. You've interacted with the framers of the curriculum. In fact, we tried to there was a scheduling conflict, and that's the reason Professor Karthik Raman of IIT Madras couldn't be here, but he played a key role in framing the curriculum. But I believe Bhanu has interacted with him quite a bit, so he will sort of fill in with the details. Tell us, Bhanu, tell us what is the curriculum, what does it seek to do, and your take on the whole topic.
Yeah, thanks, Kalyan. Pleasure to be here with all of you. I think before we jump into what the CBSE CT and AI curriculum in itself is, let's just zoom out for a minute or two. Broadly looking at around the world, a lot of education systems around the world did take various steps in terms of embracing AI and embedding that into their K-12 curriculum framework. And there are broadly three types of ways in which countries seem to have approached it, right? The first approach is really a tactical approach of, what can I pick up topically, a list of topics, and kind of plug it into my curriculum and get to it faster. We saw those curriculums released in many countries way back already 2 years back, right? And then there are a set of, slightly more evolved conversations about, bringing in AI from a literacy and responsible and ethical use point of view before getting into skills and coding and others, which was the second set of countries who kind of got into that. And now we're slowly starting to see, countries like India and, even China and others who are taking a slightly different approach, which is more foundationalist in the sense. And what do I mean by that is that looking at the curriculum, not just from a point of view of where can I plug in AI literacy and AI skills, but also really looking at as a precursor and a parallel capacity building to be able to deal with AI literacy and AI skills and certain other advanced learning in the future. what are the foundational capacities which are required, which are embedded into the CBSE curriculum in the form of computational thinking. So India is taking a slightly different approach. I personally believe that it's a much more stronger, robust approach in the long run to create differential capabilities, not just for what future of learning in high schools and middle schools would be just on AI and AI skills and AI literacy, but also computational thinking as a spine across grades will help across all subjects, from moving away from route learning to a little bit more thinking based learning, which is something which I've been asking for decades and decades and decades. So I'll pause and I'll pass it on to others, and then I'll come back as the conversation flows.
Okay, I asked Viplav Bakshi. Sir, tell us. We were discussing, we were having quite a bit of an engaged and interesting discussion before we started the webinar. Continue. Tell us more, sir.
So the CTI curriculum essentially talks about developing various levels of computational thinking skills, and also tries to do some work in classes 6 to 8 on AI literacy and a little bit of AI skilling as well. And it's a great move. I think students will really benefit from it. So will teachers, and it is more in line with what the current trends are. In fact, China just yesterday released its own manifesto on how AI in education should work, and they are talking about a much more involved sort of effort to build state-provided infrastructure for intelligent tutoring, for grading, for building governance capabilities in AI, and so on and so forth. And so, in a way, it's a great time for AI in education to be at the forefront. These skills are required. Just a few points on the implementation side of it and the design side of it. I think uh, while this is laudable, what we have to really worry about is how it's going to be implemented in across the country at a scale that we have right now. And many people have also thought about different methods to do that. But I think we need to really think about how it will be designed and implemented. The other thing that we need to think about is how the curriculum itself is structured. So I think in classes 6 to 8, given that students are already using a lot of AI in other contexts, I think that it should be more hands-on. But if you say hands-on, then it also lays, pressure on infrastructure, providing the necessary compute power, the necessary inference power, etc. to do that. And I think that is one place where we should get into in a much deeper manner. We should get deeper into teachers' capability and teachers' enablement and empowerment through platforms. I think that's a hugely important piece of it. I think we need to be able to prepare them not just in service, but right from the time they are in their uh, education degree courses and programs and certifications, or in their continuing certifications that are there. So we need to also think about the upstream effects and the downstream effects of how we're going to implement this. That's going to be very important as well. Uh, in terms of the actual curriculum and design, I think we should be looking a bit more at the making part of it. And there is a great possibility for us to use some of the existing initiatives that are already being funded by the government. For example, Atal Tinkering Labs, right? Or even work on the Diksha portal or whatever. So we have some initiatives that are around us which we can really use to implement the curriculum properly. So basically, a few of these major themes were going through my mind when I read through the CTI curriculum, and I think that we could possibly discuss a few of them here.
Okay, I ask Asif, tell us, state the basic elements of the curriculum and then critique it, which is what you did in the article. Perhaps you can do it here. Start with.
Yeah, sure, Kalyan. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks, Banu and Viplav, for your inputs as well. So, what the curriculum basically does is introduce computational thinking and AI starting from class 3 and till class 8. For class 3 to 5, it is embedded in the existing subjects. The computational thinking is embedded in mathematics, and a little bit of puzzles and other aspects are embedded in the subject called the world around us. So, I specifically wanted to talk about the introduction of CT and AI for class 3 children, and specifically the 50 hours annually for children between class 3 and class 5, and 100 hours for children in class 6 and class 8, right? So, um, uh, yeah, so this is the overall picture of the curriculum. My argument is we need to get the fundamentals right before building the ground floor and the first floor. So fundamental that I'm talking about is the LSRW, or listening, speaking, reading, and writing. These needs to be strengthened, and so far the data says that children are not yet there. At least majority of the children are not yet there, and adding another 50 hours to the existing curriculum, it is going to add how it is going to be taken up is a challenge. And obviously, during the further rounds of discussion, I will definitely come up with how these can be tackled, right? On the ground level, what needs to be done, what can be done, because the academic year has full-fledged not yet started. So there are certain things that we can do. So I just leave it with one thought from UK's Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. Earlier this year, they wrote that not reading is directly impacting on national security, and since children are offloading thinking work to AI and all that, it is kind of becoming like a national security threat. So they are optimizing it for getting the fundamentals right. And in fact, they have announced 2026 as the national year of reading, right? On the other hand, we in India, based on the available data, we have not met the literacy target. In fact, NIPUN Bharat is the results are to be announced this academic year. We still do not know, but if we go by ACER's data or Parak's data, we are still not there yet, right? So literacy is still not to the level where we want to go. So my point is sequencing is required, and why 50 hours, why 100 hours? Those are the aspects I would love to discuss during this session. Over to you, Kalyan.
Okay, there's a very preliminary question that's come in. Shekhar GMP from TRIPS International School, Rajamahendravaram in AP. May I know the practical ways to integrate computational thinking into subjects like math and other subjects? I believe this curriculum is seeking to introduce computational thinking in math. How does it do it? What are the pathways?
So you have things like, for example, pattern recognition or functional decomposition, verbal reasoning. You've got a lot of different kinds of parts of what computational thinking is all about. And much of it, a lot of it is currently also present in, in the existing mathematics curriculum as such. So you can pick a lot out of that, right? Like for example, pattern recognition, if you want to see how the sequence is moving from, say 2, 4, 6, 8, what is the next one in the sequence? So that is one kind of skill that is already in place there. Likewise, there are so many other types of different skills that are already covered in the mathematics curriculum, and we are just in 3 to 5, we are just extending that. We're just saying that, okay, here are a few more worksheets and workbooks, and we are trying to increase the number of sub-skills that we're teaching in that area. Decomposition, for example, you say plan a school's event budget. So that becomes like a entire thing where you have to look at, okay, there are these various heads in the school event of activity. This is what they will need. So decomposition becomes one there. abstraction becomes one important thing. Like you have somebody is telling you about a particular story or about a particular case, but you need to pick out, what are the key information pieces there, or what is the, and know the relevant details, um, and things like that. And then things like algorithmic thinking, logical reasoning, evaluating or debugging a particular thing as well, and also looking at how to generalize from a specific case to make a more um, generalized inference, like what happens when evaporation happens. So evaporation, if you understand the concept, then you can apply that to clothes drying and water cycle, or conversely you can see what's happening in clothes drying and water cycle, and then generalize to the idea of evaporation. And then of course data skills, creativity, collaboration, a lot of different things in which you can integrate with the math curriculum, the science curriculum, and even language. I think language is being underserved here. We should definitely have um, CDs in language as well.
I think broadly, to really think about computational thinking is not just feeding into what is required for AI later on, but it's far more broad and holistically impacting, analytical thinking and critical thinking outcomes, influencing all subjects across later on. I think I would also like to kind of stretch the conversation a little bit more. I think we need to look at two tiers, right? I mean, if you look at 3 to 8, there are two blocks, right? 3 to 5 is one block, and the way the curriculum asks things to be done there is slightly different from what the curriculum anticipates or aspires to do from 6 to 8, right? So I think we had a little bit of discussion on 3 to 5, and we'll come back to that. But I'll also like to spend a little bit more time on 6 to 8 as well, right? So at CSF, every 2 years, we do a survey, which is called the Bharat, a tech survey, wherein we kind of look at what is the digital context and usage and behaviors of households which are low resourced households. So typically the households where the children might be studying in either government schools or low fee private schools and stuff like that, right? So the 2025 survey clearly shows that over 72% of children have access to mobile phones in these low resourced households across the country. 63% of them already use it for some edtech learning, doubt clarification, problem solving kind of scenarios. Of them, 35% of the students who are in these middle grades are already using AI. So they're already using AI even before AI made it into their curriculum, right? On the teacher side, we are seeing that over 98% of them have access to, internet and mobile, all of that, even in the most rural contexts. 87% of them have used it for some education, teaching, learning resources, creation, generation, modification, all of that. And of the teachers, over 51% of them have used AI to either create something, review something, check something which is related to teaching, learning. So at a population scale, our middle school is moving towards becoming users of AI. And thereby there's an urgent need to, double dip and intensify on creating AI literacy in the middle school at population scale for our children as well as our teachers to do the following. One is to really help them understand fundamental concepts of AI, make them understand what is a good use of AI versus a bad use of AI, which is, I'm oversimplifying here, but the difference between, offloading my homework to an AI tool versus doing my homework in draft version and asking the tool to give me a review or how I can improve it and then improve my work, right? One is a degenerative process of offloading. Another is a, highly generative process of improving my work, right? And then comes the question of, what does it mean to use AI ethically and also have the ability to, ability and agency to ask and verify AI's output, right? So I think even before we get into skills, as a common general user of all AI tools which are freely available all around, there is a hygiene literacy layer which needs to be created. And working with IIT Madras, CSF has created AI Samarth, which is a large-scale AI literacy initiative which have been mainstreaming into state schools in various states, and over 2.5 million children have already undergone that. And through that, what we have really seen is the point which Asif was talking about, right? We need to really go down and figure out what the pedagogic instrumentation is going to look like at the last mile in the classroom, not just from a conceptual point of view, but also from a mother tongue, agency point of view as well, to work on comprehension barriers and other stuff which the children might have, right? So and then obviously go on to doing basic skills and all of that stuff, right? One interesting thing to look at is the CT is spiraling from grade 3 all the way in the subjects to grade 8, right? So there are two sort of ladders in a way. If you can see the computational thinking, analytic thinking, all of that is spiraling inside the core subjects all the way up. And then there is this AI literacy and AI plug-ons which are happening, and that is happening from 6 to 8 onwards. There's really no getting the children to start using AI tools and all that stuff below grade 6. The curriculum is not advocating for that. I just wanted to point that as well.
You talk about how AI literacy is being introduced. We've heard some criticism that AI's biases, especially, I mean, I have seen young people turn to ChatGPT as their friend, philosopher, guide, and because it's very supportive, it's praising, it gives me practicals, it's better than any friend and parent. That's the kind of thinking, or at least there's this approach among young people towards AI. Does it really tell people about? Will it tell children about the biases and how it's a system, and it's actually governed? A lot of the popular tools are governed by commercial interests and so on. Are the caveats built into what the curriculum is seeking to do?
Yeah, so I'll quickly come and then I'll ask Vipul and Asif to follow on. So in the AI literacy curriculum of the AI Samarth program, working with IIT Madras, we actually intensified on that, really, pushing the needle on talking about responsible AI, the aspect of ethics when using AI, questioning AI, and all of that stuff, right? The exposure is already happening, and we don't have control of limiting the exposure in any which ways. It will only intensify, and thereby the intensified need of AI literacy and responsible AI conversations and ethical use of AI conversations intensify. And so we need to do more urgently and more intensely on AI literacy to create the distinction between productive usage and non-productive usage as a learner and as a teacher.
Others, the caveats in AI, are they being
So,
taught?
Kalyan, the points that you mentioned about is LLMs, which are essentially like a AI tool, right? So it's more like learning to use the phone, but you do not know how the phone operates underneath, right? And that's
Right.
where the curriculum comes into picture, right? Computational thinking, right? Data analysis, algorithmic thinking, right? How do these machines operate, right? When ChatGPT says that, hey, don't worry, I'm here for you, right? Does ChatGPT really mean, or is the does the student have an understanding that it is predicting the next word, right? So that's the fundamental understanding that the children need to know, and that is what the curriculum that has been built now is in a way trying to address. Now, I already mentioned the curriculum is good, but with caveats, right? Now, how many teachers know how AI works, right? So that is a gap that I'm seeing on the ground, right? So when you are integrating computational thinking with mathematics, how certain are we that this teacher will be able to deliver computational thinking in a way that the child understands, right? And second thing is, how do we know that this child has the comprehension ability to understand what the teacher is trying to say, right? Now if you look at the data again, coming back to the literacy part, we are still not there, right? More than 50% of children in class 5 are not able to read a story written for class 2, right? So that's the gap that we need to bridge. Probably before getting into the curriculum, we could even have like a precondition that instead of putting in 50 hours, let's do 10 hours, right? Like just the way we used to if you studied in a KV, you will know that there was a period called SUPW, right? Socially useful productive work. That is something I really totally enjoyed it, right? Even today, I'm able to work with electrical wires and all that because I studied that at school, and it was not graded, it was completely hands on. And in a week, barely one period was there allocated for SUW, and it was amazing, right? And that's how it needs to be introduced, not like 50 hours, right? Now I'm a teacher, and let's say I'm a teacher, and I'm already teaching mathematics, and you are giving me another 50 hours of teaching this, right? And it is just a set of worksheet, right? Remember back in those days, if you had again studied in CBSE, you had a normal textbook, and then you had a workbook or read for pleasure, right? How many of us read for pleasure? No, because and in the final assessment, that no question is going to come up, right? Or barely one question is going to come up, and the teacher is going to say, hey, read the third story, this is what the question is going to come up, right? So uh, gone are the days where everything is done by the teacher and the school, right? Now everybody is involved, right? Now Viplav's team will be involved directly in educating the teachers, right? So Banu, from a principal standpoint, they are doing it, right? So now we need to solve this principal agent problem also,
Yes.
right? If I as a principal have an agenda that, hey, my children should be AI literate by the time they reach class 8, and then I have a teacher, for him it is not an objective, right? So what is my KPI, right? My KPI is, hey, my student should pass mathematics. In that there is one question in computational thinking, that's okay. I mean, he's anyway going to pass, or I'll find a way to pass. So these aspects are something that we need to discuss. In fact, if we have some parents here listening, I would definitely suggest you to go and ask your school, can my child who's passing from class 2 to class 3 read and understand the CT questions or text? If the answer is yes, fantastic, go ahead and do it. If the answer is no, slow down, right? Nothing wrong is going to happen if you're not doing 50 hours, if you're doing only 10 hours, right? In fact, you take Singapore for example, right? They fix the literacy problem first, right? 89% of students were able to read and interpret text, and then they introduced 10 hours, right? And that 10 hours were done by experts in AI, not the school itself, right? Now you can even think, there is also a paper I recently read in Finland. Again, they solved the literacy problem and introduced computational thinking, and one of the findings that they have is teachers who had a fundamentals in ICT, right? They were performing well in delivering computational thinking courses than other educators, right? So if we don't solve this principal agent problem, it'll be like, hey, yes, I as a principal, I want, we are going to have AI sovereignty, we are going to be AI literate, all of that. Like, vision is fantastic, right? I'm absolutely aligned with that, right? But on ground, are we solving it, right? On ground, have we already fixed the fundamentals, right? Do we have enough measurements to say that we have fixed it or not fixed it? What is the gap, right? and how are we going to measure that gap, and what are the key parameters that we are going to measure that will tell us that, hey, we are growing, not growing, or there is a deceleration, or we are stagnant. So these are the aspects I think we as a society need to talk about, right? Both from a company standpoint, educator standpoint, parent standpoint, as well as government standpoint. Sorry, I took a little long, but yeah, this is my point.
No, I'm fielding a related question. As Jyoti Raina, she's saying no educationalists in the panel. Point taken. We should have had principals, school teachers. Point
Okay.
taken for future too.
So, Jyoti, just for your knowledge, I mean, while I did not directly was employed in a school to teach, I have volunteered at least 100 hours teaching children between the age of 8 and 11. And I have been in the K-12 segment for 3 years, again, teaching children between the ages of 8 and 13. So, honestly, I do understand the kind of problems that are being faced on the ground, right? So I'm definitely
Oh, the
talking
others
from
too.
the
They
educator's
Yeah, the
standpoint.
others too. They have
Others too, of
excellent
course. Yeah.
credentials. They have excellent credentials as far as teaching, involved with students and so on. But let
So
me
the
read the question. So I'm a bit disappointed with the eulogization of introduction of AI to children as young in grades 3 and 5. The focus still needs to be literacy and numeracy, which is what Asif has been saying. He's been pointing this out. Have they thought through this? Have the framers of the curriculum thought through this? Now we have this deficiency in, because you need to be literate to understand some of the concepts. They're all written in English or languages, and when your math itself is so lacking, how can you introduce computational thinking? So have they thought through this problem?
I think Vipul
maybe,
wanted to come. I'll come after him.
yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's the right tone, but then by that definition, we wouldn't teach any higher math or higher science or higher English or whatever. So, we ours is a system of approximation, right? We approximate what the achievement of students is going to be. We approximate what we're going to teach. And there's one time when we there's one statistic that 50% of the students or 60% of students actually don't get more than say 50 or 60% every year. So they're actually in a learning deficit every year, going from year to year. So are we actually doing justice by teaching them an advanced concept in math or science when they don't understand so it's a whole spiral that is a systemic thing, and therefore we are approximating learning to a great degree. But I think that on the other side, even if you don't want to tell students about AI, they are going to experience it. And so why don't we just take a head start on it, and go forward from there? Critical thinking, computational thinking, of course, is already a part of the curriculum.
So I'd just like coming here. So let's be very clear what the curriculum proposition is. The curriculum proposition for grades 3 and 5 is only limited to introducing fundamental computational thinking concepts and ideas, and not AI at all. AI comes in only in grade 6 and above, right? That's one clear aspect I would like to park on the table, right? Now, the aspect of computational thinking needing a certain level of literacy capability and also numeracy capability is a true fact, and that is something which should happen. And like Asif pointed out, one of the important aspects to keep in mind is that in India, we are not dealing with a homogeneous situation across schools, right? There are, various levels of, outcomes which are produced from a competency-based across grades in different types of schools around the country, right? And like Asif said, if at grade 2 and grade 3, we know that those capabilities of literacy and numeracy are in the fair order, by all means, go into the conversations about computational thinking. And if they are a little bit lower, then you think about, would you do it a little later? Would you do it in a lesser quantum and all of that stuff, right? Now, let's also be clear that the curriculum rollout notification and all of that is primarily for the CBSE schools. It's not for all the schools in the country. There are various other boards, state boards and all of that stuff, who also need to start looking at how is it that they're going to take inspiration from the CBSE curriculum, and how is it they want to do it in their own state or in their own board, right? They can start a grade later, they can start with lesser number of hours and all of that stuff, right? Those permutation combinations do exist from in terms of designing how the entire curriculum hits the last mile, right? Having said all of this stuff, one of the big aspect remains teacher capacity building and teachers tuning into all of this. One of the things which I really liked, which the CBSE did along with launching the curriculum, which I think a lot of people might not have caught on, is the institutionalization of a whole 6 to 9 month period of district level deliberations by teachers on piloting this inside schools and having district level deliberations, and then sending a lot of structured feedback back onto this. For this particular topic, this pedagogy seems to be working. I tried this worked. I tried this, didn't work. I would encourage all of us who are interested in really figuring out how the last mile would look like, to look at what CBSE did in terms of designing that whole 6 to 9 month cycle and this guideline on district level deliberations is alongside the notification itself in the CBSE website if you want to look at. Two things happen there. One is the teachers are becoming action researchers by taking whatever has been put in the curriculum and the student and teacher handbook and piloting in the classroom. And the teachers are given the agency and the ability to figure out what seems to be working and what doesn't seem to be working, and feed that back into the system. And I think that iterative cycle, which will need to happen in year 1 or year 2, I think is already built in. And it's not like a curriculum is rolled out and then you're on your own. But I think this time it's very interesting that the deliberations from the last mile and piping that back in a very structured manner to the curriculum design itself, and improving the handbooks, and whatever handbooks are there right now are not they are just the beta version, so to speak. And as this process happens, I think those handbooks and all of that will become far more tighter and far more better as we go on, right? So
Manu,
I just
do you know why the hurry? I mean, why 6 to 9 months? I mean, 6 to 9 months is a blip on the horizon of education systems, right?
I think
why wouldn't you do it with, say, 100 schools in the first year, 5,000 schools in the second year? I'm just curious. I'm not.
Yeah, I think both approaches are right. I think it is all about if we. Firstly, I think one thing I would really like to point out is at the time of launching the curriculum itself, they've institutionalized this cycle, which I think didn't happen in a lot of previous situations, right? That was one thing which is a very good thing which has happened. Now the teachers can pilot, iterate, give feedback, say this is working, this is not working, blah, 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 and do that. I do agree that the cycle should, I think the time mechanics of the cycle is to feed it inside 1 year back so that the handbooks for next year could be worked on. And I would imagine that 1 or 2 more cycles of this should happen across next 1 or 2, 3 years until we get to one version of what it is.
The reason I'm saying it is in class 6 to 8, there's this element of project-based learning. Yes. So in what is expected from subject teachers is that they will actually help identify a project which is interdisciplinary in nature. They will interact with other teachers to arrive at the idea for this project. They will include the computer science teacher who is expected to know AI and who is able to guide and assess the AI component of the entire thing separately, while the subject teachers handle their own assessment separately. First of all, I think project-based learning by itself requires discipline from the students and an idea of how to do projects at all, collaboration, team building, task division, etc. For both teachers and for students. You also need then a way to collaborate between teachers. You also need ideas of what could work across subjects. You also need to have subject teachers building AI capabilities. How many of our teachers would have gone through the same CTAI curriculum before coming and teaching it in class, right? So I think we are setting ourselves up for failure fairly fast if we don't do the basics of preparation and so on and so forth. Of course, we can live and learn. We can iterate. We can live and learn. But this is experimentation on humans, on children, which I don't think we should do too much. We should do it in the, to serve certain purposes, but not at this wide scale extent. What do you think?
I hear you, but I also see the point of allowing teachers to dabble with it and come up with what is working, not working, as opposed to saying I'll just choose 100 schools and let them define what everybody does in the country. Here, I think with the district level deliberation cycle, that agency is given to all schools across. I mean, even a school in Andaman and Nicobar can, do their own deliberation and send stuff back, which is something I personally like, that approach, that the agency is kind of broadly
Only
spread out.
CBSE schools.
This
And
is
the
what
district.
CBSE is doing. This is what CBSE is doing at this point. And like I said, each state board have to also start thinking about, like Asif said, right? If I think my state is like this and my grade 2, grade 3, whatever, like this, do I start at grade 3? Do I start at grade 5? All of that is a variability which each board needs to start thinking about, right? And I'm
Usually
sure those,
CBSE starts the process. They initiate things. It's like a template for other boards too.
I mean, we can say that sort of somebody has to be the pioneer and take the bet and move forward, and then everybody kind of takes inspiration for that. One of the thing I would just like to add here to the point which Asif was talking about, the fundamental, NIPUN goals and all of that stuff, right? Let's also remember that while NIPUN was a 5-year program, in all practicalities, it was just a 3 or less than 3 years program because of the pandemic, which immediately hit after NIPUN got rolled out, and a whole 2 years was really, NIPUN was really not able to execute itself, right? And then work started once the schools opened and all of that stuff. And if you, I mean, the 25 results are yet to come, but if you look at 24 Asar and even Bharat, I think there was a 7 percentage point increase reported in 24 on certain parameters. That doesn't mean that the goals have been met, but the needle is moving in the right direction. And I think for an under-addressed aspect for over the last 50 plus years, 5 years of work, and with pandemic actually 3 years of work, I think we need another 5 years wave or whatever to really work on that. And it's a constant process which needs to happen. And I'm really looking forward to that next wave of NIPUN 2.0 to really, move the needle even more further, so that, not just the, schools which are performing on the right side of the curve, but schools which are on the left side of the curve are also, moving towards the center in terms of accomplishing those goals.
Bhanu, have you also seen any movement on the teacher eligibility test being revamped to include computational thinking skills and AI literacy skills? And have you also looked at seen anything happening on the B.Ed program, which I think needs a overhaul in terms of its IT component? Maybe it requires a lot more of AI this thing as well coming in to the system, because
I think a lot of conversations are happening. But like you rightly pointed out, one of the fulcrum of all of this is really how do we capacitate our teachers to do it. Like Asif pointed out, I think the lever is really, at least from a CBSE point of view, it might come to the ICT teacher really kind of championing this and doing the action research to basically get everything back. But I think
I'm concerned about the reliance on the ICT teacher, and there's, I think, a comment also made by one of the participants.
Yeah.
On AI literate, do we depend on retraining an existing base of teachers, or do we focus more on getting new AI literate teachers who can formulate, next 3 years,
I
5
think
years, what?
so. Our own experience of working with mainstreaming AI Summit, which is the AI literacy program we've been doing for 2 years, there we have been working with teachers from all subjects. Even Hindi and English teachers are actually teaching AI literacy. And that seems to be working well from the AI literacy component part of it, right? When it gets to skills, maybe it can be a little bit more different. But the younger teachers can still do it much faster than the older teachers just because of how digitally savvy they are and stuff like that. But I think a lot more strengthening of how the teacher training happens both in surveys and pre-surveys needs to, that's a big body of work which needs to go along with all of what we're talking about.
And also the teaching approach, the PBL approach or the constructionist approach, the making approach, then there was one criticism somebody had said was, why are you teaching regression in class 7? Why don't you let them experience what regression is? Multiple variables working together, and then put a name on it later. Let them experience it. Why isn't it a more experiential curriculum? Why isn't it more? This is theory from Seymour Papert on constructionism, where you are first starting from making rather than thinking or socializing about it. You're actually making something. That's where Lego, etc., came from. And it's AI is all about making. So I think that kind of thought process also needs to be put in place.
Yes, agree with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a point here. So, Banu, you were mentioning about how the state can eventually try to, adopt the curriculum and deal with it, right? So, uh, what I see with this Parag Rashtriya Sarvekshan 2024, uh, the private schools are not insulated, right? So in fact, the rural students are faring well in mathematics and language than um, uh, you know uh, the private school city going
Yes.
counterparts. So that is still a challenge. So again, coming back, the fundamentals is still a challenge, and like Viplav clearly said, a slow rollout, testing the waters, and eventually getting there would be the right approach. And again, depending on ICT teachers is also now not right. So now we don't need to have like a separate IC teacher. Every teacher should be empowered to handle computers, empowered to handle anything related to AI. That doesn't mean that they have to sit and code and do all of those things, but they need to be AI fluent. They need to understand how the algorithms work, and how uh, uh, just the fundamentals enough to educate the children about it. And Viplav, you also brought about the point about project-based learning. This is really an exciting part of the curriculum, and I sincerely hope that it works. Right. So I mean, we've also been trying that. Again, here, uh, everything revolves around the teacher, right?
Yes.
When it comes to project-based learning, it is the teacher. The teacher is the lesson, right? Even a little bit of help in making the student present themselves better is a big learning for children, and everything else is like they are eventually going to learn it, right? Children are like natural learners, right? Teachers, we are just facilitators, we are just enablers. That's all that we do. Children will pick it up, right? So our goal is to strengthen the fundamentals in a way that it is not cognitively loading both for the teachers and the children. At the same time, the children are also able to be AI fluent, not just using ChatGPT, but also the underlying part, right? So broadly, the curriculum kind of addresses that, but right now it is like super aggressive, right? In fact, there was one question in the audience also, right? Assuming that why do you have to introduce AI at school level, right? So the perception is AI means interacting with the computer, right? So that is not the fundamentals. So the curriculum takes care of it. It's just that it's kind of dumping everything at one shot at class 3, without being prepared. So repercussions will be higher, and I'm kind of afraid that we might reach the same stage as NIPUN is right now, right? So 2 years from now, we would say, hey, we were very aggressive, we tried to push it, and we kind of did not have the outcome. So therefore, we'll be extending for another 2 years or 3 years. So let us not reach that stage. So before implementing it, let's put all these guardrails in place. Let's see at least some teachers are engaged, right? If required, also involve some private players in teaching. If the government is not able to do it by themselves, involve private players who are already AI literate, building tools and already training teachers. So if they can also be participative in this program, I think together we will be able to strengthen the learning process of children.
I'd like to
The
address
questions are piling up.
Edwin's
The
question
questions are
on.
piling up. Let's address some questions. Yes, Edwin saw me since many children in early grades still struggle with reading. Why isn't the AA curriculum being designed around speech first tools?
So this, I think, is in the tools are already available to do speech first, and there are a lot of local work. Sarvam is one such player in the market. Bharat GPT is another one. Bharat GPT is another one. As far as the curriculum being designed around speech first tools, give us examples of what you think speech first tools will be in the curriculum. Will there be a technique? Will you talking about creating such tools or talking about using such tools? Edwin, give us some ideas about that. And Kalyan, there was a great question on assessments by Harshit Babu.
While you pull that question, I would just like to, address a point which Asif talked about. I mean, pretty clearly, obviously, the teacher is teacher is the cornerstone for all of this to work with, right? And not just the ICT teacher, but all subject teachers should be AI aware, AI ready. Even a Hindi teacher can use AI in his or her classroom, right? That is a given. But there's a lot of work which needs to happen there. Having said that, in terms of how fast, how aggressive we want to go or not go, my view really is on AI literacy. We should go aggressive because the children are already interacting with AI in their own homes outside the school, right? Now the topical depth of computational thinking, when will I start coding, and all of that stuff can slide up and down wherever it is. But what we are seeing at a population scale is by the time the child gets into grade 6 and above, particularly in the lower income households, sort of these children are actually becoming the primary drivers of the digital technology in their homes. Like, go do this on the mobile, then you will get that. Go to this tool, create a WhatsApp generated Insta, this, that. They are actually working with far more agency. So AI literacy can't wait. It should happen urgently, faster. And every teacher should know that, and every teacher should be able to teach at least the AI literacy part. And that's what we've been trying to push from the AI Samarth part of it. And we have worked with all subject teachers, Hindi teachers, English teachers, science teachers, social teachers, and we've been able to deliver that. So there's a whole playbook which is working in Orissa, there's a whole playbook working in Punjab, in Tripura, and a lot of other places, which can be picked up and replicated. So literacy, population scale, as fast as we can, as intense as we can. Other things, as underlying capabilities are built, level it based on where your cluster of schools can really be. We do know that CBSE schools would be a notch up, and maybe some other schools might be a little bit behind. And then each state, like I said, each state board also has to start thinking about how they're going to do it for their own state, right? That step needs to be thought through.
Okay, physically challenged children, is there a difference? Should they be taught differently, CT?
Yeah, I think that's a really important place. Assistive technologies have had a long history, and there's been a lot of focus on assistive technologies. So first of all, in the use of assistive technologies which are enabled by AI is going to be a hugely important thing. Secondly, design of educational experiences of physically challenged students. And why physically challenged? Even mentally challenged or learning challenged students who have a interface with learning in our school systems. they need experiences which are much more tuned to what to their ability, to their specific abilities, and we should definitely go ahead and ensure that we have used AI adequately to meet their needs.
Okay, here's a related question which we talked about how other subject teachers may also have to incorporate these. We have Tinkercad for 3D design, coding, etc., and EduBlocks to code with text-based languages like Python, etc. Is it possible to introduce these tools to other subject teachers without burdening them with their existing syllabus so they can teach critical thinking as part of the new curriculum? Just checking how can we educate the other subject teachers and
Yeah, I would
introduce
like
the
to come in. I would like to come in here. Like when we really look at, even a social teacher can actually bring 3D design using these tools into his or her classroom, right? You see a structure and you can use some of these things to kind of build those structure virtually. I don't see a subject teacher barrier in application of tools, right? And I think, like Asif was talking about, every teacher, irrespective of the subject, should become a little bit more savvy in terms of using a portfolio of tools which are relevant. And that identification of those, capacity building, and then creating ped use cases around those tools, how they can be plugged into various lessons and use case scenarios, needs to be also worked upon.
Okay. Edwin Somi has another question, a little bit more involved than this previous, since the Digital Personal Data Protection Act will only be fully enforceable in 2027, but the AI curriculum is already being rolled out now. Should we assume CBSE schools are already DPDP compliant? Or is AI being introduced ahead of a fully? How are the two related? Why should there be DPDP compliance?
I think, like I said, if the understanding is we are going to introduce LLM based tools to educate children through this curriculum, no, it is not. The fundamental is going to be computational thinking, where children will be solving puzzles, doing logical connections and all of that. And then they will also do a little bit of projects and things like that. So there is no way any kind of personal data that would be used, because the curriculum does not prescribe usage of any specific tool. So I think, Banu, if you have additional
Yeah, I would
points.
just like to add here, while a tool-related DPDP Act application is a different conversation altogether, the concept of digital privacy is something which is a integral part of AI literacy itself, and sensitizing the students to be careful about what personal information they are putting into various AI tools while they're interacting with them. All of that is a sensitizing aspect, which is, I think, baked into the AI literacy curriculum in terms of being careful about sharing too much personally identifiable data to a bot or anything like that. That, I think, is already there. But that's from
Also,
a literacy and hygiene point of view.
also, Asif, I think the students are using AI outside the classroom.
Yes.
So for them to be aware, as I just mentioned, that there is a need for them to understand what is privacy. But the
Yeah.
question also is about the DPDP Act, and it will become mandatory for all software providers who are handling any personal information to have those systems in place in consent. But it is a big area because consent itself is something that is it's supposed to be optional. But as a parent in a school with a student, the child going there who's running a system and assessment using AI, and you say, I don't want to use it, what is the alternative? So there are practical issues there.
Yeah, I mean, DPDP and education and health are separate panels on their own, which need webinars on their own, right? But I think one thing to keep in mind is the DPDP Act also does give the institution certain things, like if your child is enrolled in a school and the school takes a decision on or the education department takes certain decision on, we're going to use this tool versus that tool, I think parental consent is skipped because the school is acting on behalf there. But the responsibility of the the school or the education board which is working with a software layer or a software provider, ensuring the DPDP is complied with still remains to be standard. But that's a conversation for another panel in itself. So let's bring the conversation back to AI curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean,
consider
Kal, I'll just add one more point here. Since DPDP was brought into picture, so probably, I mean, if you are someone who is running a private school, you can do a little bit of one or two workshops for teenagers on digital privacy and how to be safe, in terms of using AI. That kind of small workshops is something that you can obviously run. Yeah, so just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, consider year 2030. Norway has made AI mandatory in schools. China is producing most AI command prompt engineers. US tops in data centers. The AI bubble hasn't burst. India sees sharpest rise in data and privacy litigation. I suppose it's a lawyer who's asking this question against all AI companies and NCRT, CBSE. The Hindu cover 86% CBSE teachers don't understand AI basics. What could have gone wrong in 2026-27?
I think precisely what we
He's
have been
putting himself
discussing.
in 2030.
Yeah, precisely
What?
what we've been discussing so far. When you start implementing something at scale, even the mistakes are amplified at scale. So when you design PBL method in class 6 and expect 5 teachers of different subjects to own it in a collaborative manner, are they prepared for it or not? So design plays a big role, and the implementation strategy plays a big role. And you have to think very deeply about this. That's why in some cases people look at a very phased strategy, very clear strategy to do things. For example, we did work in CCE and we had to scrap that. We did work in OTBA, which is open text-based assessments, a brilliant initiative by the CBSE. That couldn't survive more than a couple of years. So if CTAI is going to become the bedrock of India's preeminence in the artificial intelligence field, I think we should give it a lot more consideration, which the CBSE is doing now in its first step, and I think we can improve a lot.
Okay, there's a related question. Harshit Babu is taking it further. He's asking, we have millions of teachers, many of whom have limited exposure to computational thinking or AI pedagogy, and evidence suggests even uneven. So the question he's asking is, should we create a new army of AI literate or enabled teachers instead of going and retraining a whole generation of millions of them? What is the right
No,
strategy?
I think it's not about just creating a new people. We have to start with teachers who are currently already in the classroom and bring them up to speed, and then also in parallel work with pre-service supply chain. It's not an either or, it is a both.
Yeah, we need multiple approaches. Like we are trying to enable teachers at the grassroots. So ensure that every teacher has AI skills and they're enabled without having that burden of learning AI and going through a course and all that stuff. So it needs to become part of their life, just that like they're using a mobile phone, they're using AI to do various things in their day-to-day life, which makes them more powerful, more effective as teachers. It allows them to develop professionally. It enables them to create better learning experiences for the students. So like China's, I just pasted all of China's thought process on teachers. They released the policy yesterday, and they've got an entire section on how teachers should be enabled through the use of AI in the classroom. So I think that's an important point. We need to work more on how AI can reach teachers, as importantly as we are thinking about AI reaching students. And even then, the governance part of it. I think the governance part of it is also very important. We don't talk much about that.
And I think even for the CTET eligibility test, CT and AI should be part of the questions even for teachers.
Yeah, but
And
Asif, think about it. Sorry to interrupt there. Just one quick point. 26% of people,
yes,
teachers qualified in this year's CBSE and CTET exam. And the CTET exam, when you add some more new components, what will the pass rate look like? So
correct.
I'm just trying to sort of put that out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So yeah. So we have around 74% failures. That's a bigger number, right? So Introducing the curriculum is one angle. The second angle is incentivizing that, right? If I am enabled with AI knowledge, what is the incentive for me, right? So can we also start thinking in that angle?
Yeah, I think I would just go back to one of the, like I was talking about the Bharat EdTech survey. The we are already seeing 50%, 51% of the teachers in these schools, low resource schools, who are they're already using AI, and 83% of them are aware. So it's not that they are away from it. A lot of them are using it. A lot of them are dabbling with it. But I think it is about creating a little bit more structured capacity so that they can then bring that back into the classroom to be able to deal with creating capacities for students, both on a literacy level as well as some foundational skill level as well.
Um, let's get a view from the ground. She's saying, as a student of B.Ed, she's training to be a teacher. She's saying the subject of education technology does not even touch the topic of AI and still includes mugging up of features of outdated technologies. The teacher education curriculum is so outdated. Christina Johnny.
Yeah, to the point that we were making earlier, Krishna is making a really, really important point. I don't know if she's a teacher or a student, but would love to know that. But from both perspectives, we are under preparing our teachers to actually work. We are also not consuming AI ourselves. So, for example, to create the curriculum or to go ahead and implement the curriculum as a teacher educator teaching teachers. So I think even that is something that we need to start thinking very seriously about. If we don't practice our own mantras, what's the point of talking about AI at all?
Okay, Harshit, again, if students can use, it's a very relevant question. If students can use AI to generate answers, because CBSE is going for digital assessments, how will CBSE redesign assessments to measure actual understanding rather than AI assisted output? And what does learning even mean in that context?
Yeah, I would just like to come in here, and I think the how assessments will happen when AI use is allowed and permitted is a very interesting conversation to have. We are already seeing in the higher education space where certain lecturers and professors have already started experimenting this a little bit, and I've seen a lot of discussions and conversations about, you know, uh, creating an assessment where you not only submit your output or your submission, but you also submit your entire chat conversation and all of that stuff along with the submission, so that the evaluator or the assessor is able to see, uh, have you offloaded the work to the AI, or actually you're using the AI as a co-worker with you, and you are guiding it on strategic points as to how it needs to, help you work and take the quality of the output to the next level. So that we're seeing a lot of early work happening in the higher education space, and we obviously have to figure that out in the schools as well, because it is going to happen that the children would use AI.
Another broader point, in fact, the computer science expert raised this point that the concepts are far too advanced. These are taught in undergrad levels. To expect children to understand them is a little too much. Is that so? This rush, Nijil Srinivasan, for instance, says this rush feels driven by excitement over new technology, while book reading habits receive less attention. I mean, it's not a question of either or, but still, our children's minds. Is there a mismatch between what children can learn and what is purported to be taught from
Yeah,
class?
I would
I
just
would,
quickly.
I
Yeah,
would
go ahead.
argue that we are underestimating children.
Yeah,
Okay.
agreed.
Right?
Yeah,
So
so
children
I
are
would
far
just
better learners than us. Again, adults, we are just enablers, and we are here to direct. So they will learn. That's the reason. Both Viplav and Banu were touching upon ethics and the appropriate usage of AI. All those aspects are there in the curriculum. So that direction is what is needed for children. But learning as such, they are eventually going to figure it out. If they are empowered by the right teacher and right kind of project-based learning. That is my opinion. And
So,
first
Saumi,
hand,
as a related question, will children feel left out and intimidated by AI?
I don't think so. I think
me neither.
it is teachers who wouldn't catch up would be the ones who would feel left out very soon.
Teachers would feel intimidated, not children. Okay.
Going back to the previous question, I would just like to add to what Asif said. I mean, I think our middle school students are quite better than what we all were in when we were in middle school. I don't have any doubt about that. They can catch concepts quite quickly, rapidly, and even at an evolved state, I would say. Some of the very interesting experimentations we have done in terms of pet design for communicating some of the AI concepts using extremely metaphorical vehicles are there in the AI summer curriculum. If I've pasted a link in the channel, if you want to look at how we talked about computer vision and explaining what computer vision metaphorically is for a child who has not gone out of their village and just knows the experience of a vegetable market in a village, right? So there are a lot of that pet instrumentations we have done on various concepts of AI through metaphorical vehicles. Some of these concepts, without getting into too much of technicality, can be conveyed, and our children are, like Asif said, quite smart. So long as the language vehicle is in place.
Okay, I had a question. It is a bit of a technical question. What is actually the relationship between computational thinking and AI? I know we did cover this a little bit, but from a layperson's perspective, how are the two related? I've heard or I've read things that says that AI is something else totally. It's a different thing, and computational thinking is different. How are the two related?
Some of the key skills in computational thinking are the key skills in AI as well. So if you're looking at, for example, say abstraction, that's one. If you're looking at pattern recognition, that's another. You're looking at decomposition, that's another one. There's so many of these skills that you need to have in order to understand what AI systems are actually doing, and form the underpinning of what you would do if you were to develop some of these systems. Yeah.
And I think some of these computational thinking aspects are also required for the student or the user to be able to discern between whether the AI output is biased or not. You constantly work with it, it's swinging in one direction as opposed to the other. That again comes from your experience of pattern recognition and all of that stuff. So yeah, there are a lot of crossover linkages. And like I said, CT is not a flowchart into AI and literacy skills. It is a foundational thing for across all subjects.
Just to draw an analogy, it's numeracy. For you to understand higher math, you need to have a better understanding of numbers, basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and computational thinking.
Also, so it adds to numeracy skills. Okay.
Yeah, it basically tells you that, hey, this is how the computer works. It is basically an algorithm. What is an algorithm? It's a step-by-step instruction, right? Only based on this, a computer is working, right? Just like how we say human anatomy, heart pumps the blood, and brain helps in thinking and things like that. Similarly, how a computer operates, and on top of that, there is an intelligence layer which is able to connect different dots. So that's the reason we are touching up on computational thinking for AI.
Actually, it's interesting because there are other frameworks that teachers have been inundated by. Bloom's taxonomy is one famous one. There is socio-emotional learning, SEL. That's another one. There's 21st century skills framework. That's another one. And there are many other competency frameworks that people keep on talking about for teachers as well as for students. So I think we also at some point need to unify these CT becomes one more sort of plug-in into that entire armada of skills. So I think we should simplify it for teachers. It's too much to just take in all these different techniques.
I'm really looking forward for the district level deliberation feedback flow coming back from the ground. And I would really encourage people to look at that guidelines of how to conduct it. It's I felt it was very well thought through. And I think if that feedback from the ground piloting can come back faster and faster, I think it will strengthen. One of the other aspects we also need to note is that, if you look historically, when we brought things into curriculum, they came when it was not a theory, but it was not a hypothesis, but it is science. But I think AI is like, you're sort of like building on the fly. AI itself is figuring out what it is, and then nobody wants to wait and everybody wants to, understand what it is. So unlike how we brought various earlier topics into the curriculum, on the AI side, we are bringing beta, and the beta mode and beta mindset is really important to think through. So the teachers also have to look at that. The whole concepts of teachers and action researcher comes back into play, right? I mean, if that can be applied through the, district, district level deliberations and feedback, all of that would be an interesting way to very quickly kind of, fix for the last mile for the aspiration.
Okay, fascinating. We had a really fascinating, interesting, insightful discussion. I thank all the panelists for joining us and enlightening us, and those who asked questions. So some of them really, really involved questions that took the discussion in very meaningful ways to various aspects of the issue. So I thank the participants too. We will meet in another webinar next Saturday at 5 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.